espressos with Jonathan a lot.
Yeah. Yep. You ever seen Ocean's 12? When he knocks on his door and he's had 5 espressos and I think it's 5 a.m. game day and it's usually the night before. So that's usually what happens on the road. Just kidding.
Are you
Kinda.
Are you a coffee snob yourself?
Yeah, but I'm not educated. Like I just know, I'm picky. But I mean, JG's more of an espresso guy. I like espresso and coffee. I mean, he'll take you through a whole process of how you're supposed to have the espressos with the aroma and the spoon, and then touching the lip of the cup so that it changes the temperature of when it hits your mouth, and then you never lick the spoon, and you put the spoon down, and then he's pretty educated on that. So I'm not at that level, but I'm going to work there one day.
Rob Rodriguez said he's pretty high up in the coffee game.
Rob? He's lying. I don't know what he's talking about. We got some good coffee people in the building. I'm not going to put Rob on that level. Probably not. That's usually when you can tell the espresso is probably taking him to another level. Like, why is he in my office screaming right now? Oh, he probably had a couple of espressos, you know?
So does his wife find some stuff from New England with great beans or something?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he'll definitely on the road try to, get some beans for his wife, Gina, and then Gina will, all of a sudden he'll come in with a bag of beans as a gift for me from Gina. I'm like, oh, thanks, Gina, for the beans. Yeah, it's definitely. And then she actually bought him a pretty nice machine upstairs, so he's got his new espresso machine, and I went in there. Okay, last story on espresso before we actually get to football. So I go in there. At the end of last week, I'm like, hey, like you want to, like we kind of do a one final like talk about the game plan and like how I'm gonna call it, and we have like 10 minutes before we have to go to mock game, and I'm like, yeah, you want to do it right now? He's like, sure. You want espresso? I'm like, nah, we're good. He's like, sure. You sure you don't want espresso? I'm like, no, we're fine. Like, dude, oh my god, yeah, espresso. Just rip it down, All right, football.
You want to talk football?
You got Dan Quinn coming in with his team. Jaden Daniels looking pretty good right now. What do you see in that offense?
Yeah, they're clicking. Obviously, last night they're rolling. Jaden Daniels is hard to defend because he's got arm talent, and he's got leg talent, and so that's in the run game and the pass game, and that's coupled with making really smart decisions. He's not reckless with the football. So another one of these quarterbacks that presents multiple challenges with his skill set.
A few weeks ago against Buffalo, you and JG both said you wish you had been able to contain Josh Allen a little bit better. Are there lessons you can learn from that week one, or are they such different players, Josh and Jaden, that not applicable?
Yeah, I mean, I think anything we learned in Buffalo, we've tried to apply going forward, but ultimately different players, and they present they're both challenges as far as with their legs, but different players.
What defines a Cliff Kingsbury offense?
Every offense is the funny question of what kind of system do you run? And it's like, they're running the Commander system, right? And it's really hard to defend against. But like every offense or defense around the NFL is not going to be like that much drastic than a lot of what other people run, and it's going to try to utilize the skill sets of the players they have, and they do a really good job of that. They got some really good skill players, and they get them the ball. So, it's never just like, oh, that's what let's just classify this offense as this. They do a really good job of being able to be multiple and get people the ball.
I know that you and JJ, all the coaches talk about like every game is its own game, and what you do in one game doesn't necessarily carry over to the next game. Do you look at that in terms of opponents too? Like obviously they were amazing last night offensively, Washington was, but do you see that as because this is a different game, you're not, I don't know if it's concerned or you're not thinking, okay, they're on a roll, or any of those things? Does that not enter into your?
Well, I think you try to take in as much information as possible. Whether that's analytics off the tape, whatever, on what you feel like they're doing really well, what you feel like they're maybe struggling with, and what you think that they're going to try to do against you, so that you can come up with a plan that you feel like is what's going to help you win the game. So, you take in all that information, and then you kind of devise a plan from there.
Like when you are evaluating a rookie quarterback, is 3 weeks of film enough? Do you go back and look at other things as well, or is this sufficient?
I like to have a big body of work, but you got to be able to take a look at what you got and kind of see the big picture a little bit more when there's less film of him playing in the NFL out there, and you have to be able to not necessarily be as analytical with your decisions, but a little bit more, kind of foreseeing into the future and having big picture vision, which is something I applaud JG for. I think he's really good at it, and something I lean on with him.
On Sunday against Detroit, what led to the differences in terms of execution between the first and the second half by the defense?
Danny, it's always a combination of a lot of things. Calling it better, making adjustments schematically, executing better, right? All of that. It's never just going to be a drastic, we came out and we did this and it just flipped it, right? And, each drive has its own story of, hey, how did this drive end up in 3 and out, or how did this drive end up in a touchdown? And that's usually going to be kind of this, and this, right? This was a bad call. This was bad execution. They had a really good play schemed up right here. So it's never going to be like an all or nothing answer. What I did like is that the players didn't waver up here. And, it's never easy. You give up 20 in the first half, it feels like it's oh man, is this going to be a long day? And that never was in their head. They're resilient, and they came out and showed that in the second half, and that's what I was excited to see.
It seemed like the run defense in particular was pretty stout in the second half relative to the first half. Like, is it the same story?
It's the same story. It's not like we came out and played a completely different defense. There's a couple things we tweaked, called it a little different at times in the second half, and then execution was, in some spots better than it was in the first half. Some spots still needed to be cleaned up in the second half. So it's all those factors combined.
I asked Jonathan yesterday about the 187 yards rushing for the Lions, and he said, we're not going to win many games if we do that, if we let a team get that many yards.
Yep.
What was it about their offense? They just kept pounding it? What was the difference there?
Yeah, you got to give credit to them. They came out and executed better than we did. They had a better plan, and they were able to average over 4 a carry with each back, and we just got to get better at learn from it and put a better plan together and execute better.
Was it schematic at all in that issue?
It's everything, right? There's going to be scheme things you can do better. There's going to be technique things you can do better. You could call it better at a certain time. Maybe one call was designed to take away certain things, and you didn't call it at the right time, and it's not what you wanted it for. So it's a combination.
Why are you good with him having such a big toolbox when most times coaches want their guys to have kind of a limited inventory?
You're talking about with the pass rush, because he can handle it, and he's athletic enough to be able to execute different moves without having to have a lot of rehearsal. But it's also partly because of his brain. Like, it's very calculated why he wants to do what he wants to do versus certain tackles, and I would never take that away from him.
What makes him so challenging against bigger tackles?
He's obviously got great bend and speed. But the thing that I love is, even when people try to match that speed, he's really good at transitioning into his power rushes. And so to me, he's a complete rusher because of that. So you can never just hang your hat on, if we take away this, you're taking away Dennis Gardeck. That kind of goes back into the big toolbox of he can then counter that with other things.
Overall, through 3 games, there have been some moments where this defense has looked really, really good. To you, where does that start? Like, what have been the keys to the success when the defense has had that success?
I always think it starts with our mode of play, which is high motor and violent. And I think that's shown up on the tape throughout those 3 games. there's always times where you'd point out, hey, that's a low for we could be more violent there or whatever. But the players are playing that way, and when we're clicking, it's back to the combination of really good execution. The plan was right, or it was called the right way at that time, and that's usually when you're clicking.
With Cliff Kingsbury calling the plays, with Cliff calling the plays for Washington, has his offense changed much from when he was here versus what they're doing so far this year?
I mean, there's always going to be, he's got a completely new players, right? So there's going to be differences, but then there's going to be things that he does really well schematically that I'm sure he's carrying over, or if he hasn't shown it yet, I'm sure he still has it in his arsenal. So combination of some new stuff and some stuff he probably did here too.
Were you getting encouraged by the pass rush so far?
I mean, yeah, I think it's, we've played one very mobile quarterback that you had to rush unique. And then, the last two games I've been pleased, but then there's also things that we need to improve on. So, and that's probably going to be the rest of the season, right? I always want those guys to win as fast as possible, as much as possible. So, we've done that at times. At times we could probably do it better. So we've got to keep pushing and getting it as good as possible.
What do you see from their rushing attack?
Yeah, I mean, anytime the quarterback is involved in the run game, it presents issues just from a numbers standpoint. So whether he's keeping it or giving it, that can create issues for a defense, and it's literally about numbers, and they do a great job up front of moving people.
What, if anything, can a staff do to help coach against a trick play in a live setting?
Trick plays are tough, especially if they're designed right and hit at the right time. I think it comes down to being disciplined with your eyes, playing with good fundamentals, and ultimately a thing that can kind of take that away is if you play with a higher motor and you play more violent than the opponent, even if they have something good set up, sometimes just those things can outweigh execution.
When you're playing against a rookie quarterback like Jaden this week, is there things you can do to confuse him or maybe change his looks when he's up there at the line of scrimmage?
I mean, that's something that every week we think about. How can we affect the quarterback in multiple ways, back end and rush? So, rookie quarterback doesn't necessarily influence a certain, let's get to these things. That's something that's always kind of at the forefront of our game planning.
Do you pick the brain of Kyler, anybody that was here with the old regime, to kind of get a better idea of tendencies or anything like that, or is it just new team, new system?
You got to take in every bit of information you can get. You know what I'm saying?
You mentioned with Jaden how if he has the ball, you're not sure what he's going to do sometimes. So how much does that affect defending the other running backs in the offense?
Yeah, I think you gotta account for anyone who can touch the ball. That kind of gets into some schematic stuff of how do you take away any kind of read game, RPO game, RPR game, all of that. So you got to be schematically correct with how you have it structured.
Can you sense when a player is playing with confidence? Like a guy like Mac Wilson, it just seems like he just oozes in confidence.
Ultimately, I think individuals could probably would have to tell you how confident they are. I don't have like a confident meter in my head on each person. But yeah, you can tell Mac's out there flying around. He's comfortable with our system. He's doing a great job of being adaptable and being able to kind of do a lot of different things. And guys that really know what they're doing can play fast and play violently, and that's what he's doing.